curious rabbit named as he approached a small pond.
El Silbon, urban horror legend. This story is set in the 1980s in a very beautiful village in South America called Los Llanos, where there is greenery and fields all around. Near one of these fields, a boy named Damaso was staying at his uncle's house during the holidays. In those days, people often went to bed early, so everyone had dinner in the evening and went to sleep. Damaso had gone to bed and was not feeling well. He was just looking at the ceiling fan when suddenly he heard the loud sound of animals mooing. He got up and went outside and saw that the sound was coming from a nearby animal shelter where there were many cows. He looked up and saw that the whole sky was covered with black clouds. He thought that maybe all the cows were scared of the coming storm. So he went to them to take the village to the inner camp. But with great difficulty, he started taking the village one by one to the inner camp. But Damaso had never seen the village so restless. Due to such restlessness, it was becoming difficult for Damaso to take them from there. Heavy rain had also started. With great difficulty, he sent some of the many villages to the inner camp. So he began to smell a very strong stench of meat. As he was sending more cows in, and the number of cows was decreasing, the stench kept increasing. When about 5 or 6 cows were left, he saw that there were the bones of a large cow covered in blood. Seeing this, Damaso froze there and started shouting loudly. But before he could run away or do anything, he heard a sound from a distance amidst the heavy rain. The sound was so horrifying that it sent chills down Damaso's spine. As soon as he heard it, Damaso understood that he was going to die today, because that sound was the whistle of El Silbon, which meant that El Silbon was coming for him. Damaso had heard many tales about El Silbon. He remembered how, in his childhood, his relatives would tell the story of a man who had encountered El Silbon. According to the story of his relatives, that man was also going to a function on his horse from a similar field that night. Then, in this large, remote field, his horse's foot slipped on something. When the man got down and looked, there was a deer's antlers lying there, with the eaten flesh still hanging from it. Before the horseman could understand anything, he heard a piercing whistle from afar. He tried to pick up his pitcher, but it was too late. He heard the sound of something large hitting a tree not far from him. The horseman wanted to run away, but just then a blow hit him on the head, causing his head to explode. He started looking for help, but it was no use, because a monstrous man, 19 feet tall, with the face of death, stood in front of him, wearing a hat, but evil and with a face like a king's. Tall. This monstrous man had never seen such a monstrous creature. He had a sack full of bones, and taking out the bones from the sack, he began to eat the horseman without stopping. The horseman kept begging for his life, but the man took out the bones from his body and started eating them. The next morning, some villagers, while grazing their cows, found not the horseman, but his body, which had become a skeleton. They say that the man who looks like a 19-foot skeleton is El Silbon, and he still roams this area today. This story kept running through Damaso's mind. Before he could run away, a long shadow of 19 feet suddenly appeared on the ground, and then a man even taller than that shadow emerged. He was wearing a ghostly hat, and pieces of flesh were hanging from his body everywhere. This man, who was even taller than 19 feet, was none other than El Silbon. The man started walking towards him with a bag filled with bones slung over his shoulder. The sound of bones clashing was getting louder, and even more intense were Damaso's heartbeats. To save himself, Damaso fled from there and felt that El Silbon was climbing over the trees, jumping from one tree to another, chasing him. Damaso kept shouting, but El Silbon stood right in front of him. He extended his terrifyingly long arms, from which his own severed flesh was hanging, trying to kill him. Just then, the sound of a dog barking was heard. And upon hearing it, El Silbon suddenly became startled and quickly vanished into the air. When Damaso looked, he saw his pet dog barking there, which had probably come after hearing Damaso's screams. Damaso himself believed that if his dog hadn't been there that day, his bones would have been in the bag hanging from El Silbon's stomach. After that night, Damaso kept thinking about El Silbon. When he asked his relatives and the other people living nearby about El Silbon's story, what they told him was even more terrifying than what had happened to him. People told him that the story of El Silbon was completely true, according to which a spoiled boy lived with his small family in that area in the 18th century. Since the boy was the only child of the family, his parents and grandfather would agree to all his demands. One day, the boy asked his father to bring deer meat for dinner. After that, his father took his hunting rifle and a dog and went out to hunt. When his father did not return home for a long time, the boy became very angry. His mother gave the boy a very sharp kitchen knife for his protection and told him to go into the forest to find and bring his father back. When the boy returned, his father was not with him, and in the bag were pieces of flesh, intestines, some organs, and bones, which he gave to his mother, telling her to cook it as deer meat. His mother found it strange to work with the contents of the bag while hoping for the best, and she began to feel suspicious. So, the boy's mother shared her fear with the boy's grandfather. Hearing this, his grandfather took the boy outside, tied him to a tree, and started beating him with a hunter's axe until the boy told the truth, a truth that was very terrible. The boy told that when he found his leaves in the forest, he was empty-handed because he had not been able to hunt a deer. The boy became very angry with them, and in that anger, the boy killed them with the knife he had lying next to him. He then used the same knife to remove their flesh, cut the remaining pieces of the wicked man into pieces, and stuffed them into his sack. And he came home. Hearing this truth, the boy's grandfather started beating him so hard that the boy's wicked flesh started hanging from his own. His grandfather then poured chili and wine on his wounds, opened him up with his feet, and put a big sack of his father's flesh and bones on his stomach, leaving behind his two terrible dogs. He was left to wander forever. It is said that from that day until today, the boy's soul has been wandering under the name of El Silbon. Almost all the people living in this area believe that they have at least once encountered El Silbon, who sits in the trees and whistles in a unique way. And anyone who roams the fields late at night is attacked like prey. It is said that it is only afraid of dogs, which is why everyone in the area has kept dogs in their homes. Damaso was saved that night because of his dog. Otherwise, he too would have fallen victim to Al Silbon.